What is that? What is that? What is it?
Corn and barley and corn rigs are.
Open my eyes!
I'll not forget that happy night.
Eyes! Ah! Ah!
Welcome to Applebee's, the home of the dollar margarita and America's most bountiful podcast, The Pod People. I'm Matisse Van Rossum. And what's that? Bees? In my eyes? It's more likely than you think.
I'm Ben Sheets, but you can call me Barry B, the #1 B-movie fan, starring Jerry Seinfeld.
Wow, quite a claim. Hello, I'm Cleveland Mosier, and despite all the bees, I'm still just a Nic in a cage.
Okay, that was a good one. That was a really good one. Well, we're back. It's part 2 of our 4-year podiversary. If you were with us last week, you've already heard our review of Robin Hardy's 1973 cult classic, The Wicker Man, which, spoilers, we unanimously gave 5 out of 5. It is a golden pod. And this week, we're talking about a very different movie, also called The Wicker Man, though. I'm, of course, talking about 2006's The Wicker Man, written and directed by Neil LaBute and starring Nicolas Cage, Ellen Burstyn, Lily Sobieski, and Kate Behan. And it is a remake / reimagining of Robin Hardy's 70s classic, but with a wildly different tone.
I would call it a remix in a lot of respects, you know? They're taking a lot of the same elements and doing a completely different thing with it. Different tone. But at the same time, they reuse a lot of things and pulled directly from the original.
They use a lot of, like, the exact same dialogue from the original,
Yeah,
but
in some scenes, like, word for word.
Yeah. But man, what a completely different movie. Like, it is The Wicker Man. It hits all of the same story beats, but this movie does not feel anything like the 70s version.
I know that for the previous episode, we tiptoed around spoilers for a while, but, like, on this one, since it's a part 2-er and everything else, and considering the movie, like, should we just go ahead and from the gate?
Spoiler is in the name, right? Like,
Yeah, it's
and
true.
everyone knows the bees, not the bees. They're in my eyes.
Yeah, like, it's gonna be really hard to tiptoe around this one, so I was, like, I guess in general you've been warned, but I don't really know what there is to warn against.
If you haven't listened to our last episode about the 70s version, I would recommend checking that out before this one. But
And probably watching it, too.
Yeah, I mean, we'll obviously be referencing that film a lot because we'll be talking about it in comparison to this one. But like I said, it hits a lot of the same story beats. One of the only major differences at the end is, something that has been memed into oblivion at this point.
Yes.
So I don't know how much it's really a spoiler. But yeah, you've been warned.
Well, I look at the original film, right? And there's a lot of elements of comedy in it. It's a pretty funny movie. Sure. And I feel like in making the remake, they looked at it and said, oh, the elements here are really funny. Let's just lean into that and make sort of like an absurdist black comedy.
To be honest, I'm really glad they did.
To be honest,
to just be myself. Yeah. I would say it was a good choice.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, this film got pretty reamed when it came out, both by audiences and critics.
Much like the original.
I think, in a lot of respects, this one, got so panned by critics, especially because they were expecting a fairly straight remake, and that's not what this is. Like I said, it's very much a remix in that, like, it pulls wholesale from the original, but does something completely different with it, and recontextualizes things even. Like, there's dialogue sequences that are pulled straight from the original that they recontextualized to be way funnier.
Yeah.
Or more over the top.
Yeah.
Well, you know, this movie did come out in 2006. It was definitely part of the wave of early to mid 2000s remakes of 70s and early 80s horror.
The Hitcher being another one.
The Hitcher, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Hills Have Eyes. All of these remakes were coming out around the same time. And, I mean, we talked about the Texas Chainsaw remake last year around this time. And, like, the general idea behind all of these remakes is the same but more. And in a lot of these cases, like, especially like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like, it destroys what's so great about the originals, which is a lot of times like knowing how to use subtlety versus not subtle things and largely missing the point. And I think that this movie does kind of hold true to that idea of like the same but bigger. But like you say, Ben, the things that they choose to do bigger in this movie are some of the more comedic aspects of the original, but still played incredibly seriously.
Well, that's the thing, like you said, with a lot of remakes coming out at this time, they were trying so hard to capture the spirit of the original, or at least the story of the original, that they kind of lose the intent of their own work. And that's why a lot of those films are muddled and just drab and not fun. Whereas this, it feels like they very much intentionally knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I think so. I can see why people would not read this as intentionally funny. I'm kind of in your camp that I think that they knew what they were doing more than they let on, but it is because they play everything so straight that it feels like the movie is supposed to be more serious than it is. That is also, you know, large in part to the fact that that our police protagonist in this one is portrayed by Nic Cage, who, you know, pretty much always gives 110% to whatever role he's in.
Absolute king.
And I think that the success that this movie does have is probably 80 to 90% contributed by Cage's performance. There are some other fun things about it, but I think that this whole movie would be a much more dreary affair without that leading performance.
Yeah, he does incredibly in it, as always, as expected from Nicolas Cage. And it seems like he very much leans into the camp.
Oh,
here.
yeah. And, oh my god, and so many incredible sequences. There are so many meme-worthy moments in this film. And, you know, it's funny. Maybe I need to reevaluate some perspectives of mine, because I do feel like this film did a very similar thing to the Dawn of the Dead remake, which would have been, you know, somewhat close to the same time.
Around the same time,
and,
yeah.
It takes on a completely different tone, all the rest of it. But where, like, I was, like, a little steamed, like, coming off of the Dawn of the Dead remake, I loved this. I fully embraced it. I think there's a couple of reasons why, but it is curious to me. Maybe I can get some help on fully, like, breaking all that down. But, you know, for as many, like, outlandishly, like, dumb and goofy things, there's a lot of moreisms in here where, like, you know, like, instead of just, like, a couple of photos on the wall with one missing, there's, like, a giant wall of photos with one missing.
I was joking that it looked like an Applebee's.
Yeah,
the
really
wall
does.
was just completely covered.
Yeah, it's so funny, and, like, it's that moreism thing, but, like, it's funny here. And, you know, one of the things that really rubbed me the wrong way with the Dawn of the Dead remake is, like, the color correction is, like, wretched. I found
really
it to be wretched
ugly,
to look
yeah.
at. Like, it's so overblown that people look orange, and, like, the darks are, like, so compressed that you can't really see anything, and not in a scary way, like, kind of in a frustrating way. Whereas in this film, like, I'm gonna be honest, the set design and, like, color correction of this movie, I really liked. I liked it a lot.
I like the aesthetic of this
Like,
movie a lot, too.
It looks
It-
good. Like, I was really surprised to find that. I was kind of expecting it to be sort of cheap, and it wasn't. It was, like, there's a lot of beautiful attention to detail in the set design and costuming.
It has a lot of the aesthetic hallmarks of other movies of this era, like very specific color saturation and like colored filters being added to things. But whereas the majority of the movies you see from this era are like really green, see like the Saw movies or Dawn of the Dead, or they're like really blue. They're always like really cold. This one is very warm. Everything is, they bring out like the yellows and the oranges and the earth tones a lot. And for the film, like for the setting of the film, it feels natural. It doesn't. It looks
like Dutch Flemish paintings. Like, it's great.
Yeah. I think that something else about like the reason this movie is so like weirdly funny too, in comparison to something like a Texas Chainsaw remake or Dawn of the Dead remake, is that like the original Wicker Man is a film that I feel like could only have been made when and where it did. Like, it's very 70s and it's very British, obviously. So whereas something like Texas Chainsaw, you can do the same story in any era. Like, there's something weird about trying to adapt the Wicker Man in like the mid 2000s. They make a lot of attempts to modernize it, and also like it's set in America instead of being in Scotland. It's in the Pacific Northwest. So they do some things to try to both Americanize and modernize it, and I think that some of those are somewhat of a misstep, or they don't feel as organic or natural as the original one. So it creates an atmosphere of absurdity to it that I think is much easier to have fun with than Texas Chainsaw.
Oh, definitely. Well said. I like that a lot. It is true. It's like it's straight out the gate. Yeah, Texas Chainsaw, like, it just largely feels like it's missing the point, and that's about it.
Well, yeah, and Texas Chainsaw,
it's not, like, fun for
the remake
it.
is set in the 70s, but everybody has, like, a 2000s haircut. There's no attention to detail. Yeah. It doesn't feel like they took any steps to modernize it, like they just did it but again, and missing the point. Whereas this, it's like, okay, well, we're not doing it in Scotland. We have to make it America, so we have to make it more believable for an American setting. And like, we're in a little bit more secular time, so we can't have like the protagonist be as devoutly religious, and like there has to be another weird dichotomy. So instead, it's like the island is run by like as it's presented as like evil feminism, which I don't think has aged well at all, but I think it's really funny.
No, it definitely hasn't. Especially like in some of like the earlier sequences, which I mean are kind of like a false setup to have a turn, but then only to like turn back again, if that makes any sense. But I do like some of the world building here. Is there any realism associated with it? No, absolutely not. There are these things called census bureaus that exist, which would just completely like destroy like anything of this like cult group working properly. Like, you still have to have like a census like on islands and stuff like this. You can't get away with like having all your guys with their tongues cut out or whatever. Like, this is it doesn't work like that. That's fine. Dumb movie. Totally happy to like just enjoy that and accept it because it is fun.
We'll talk more about them, but there are lots of plot holes in this movie.
Oh yeah, it's rife with them. But what I will say is like the world building, like whether it's good or not is like I mean beyond up for debate, but like it's fun. I really liked it. They kind of play up the idea that like they were part of a group that was like Celtic. Interesting choice to go Celtic and not Scottish, but like they were Celts. And then they came to the States and they were very close to where Salem was, which I think was kind of a cute, like plan. And then so they moved out here to carry on their ways.
To get as far away from the rest of society as possible.
There's some cute ideas there, and I like it too because
it's like
in some
the
ways
island is more like has more like a kind of like Amish Mennonite sort of vibe.
Yeah, very much so.
Very isolated. A secluded, like cloistered religious community. There's no cell phone reception on the island. Very little like modern technology.
No cars.
No cars.
Of course, like defeats a lot of the surprise of the original, where like they just look like normal people, and then some things are like wrong underneath the surface.
Exactly.
Here, it's like you get there and immediately it's like, whoa, cult. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
It's everything is, and you kind of called this in your prediction for this movie
Kinda.
last week, in that like everything would be more like overtly sinister from the get go, and it is the case.
Yeah, I mean, like he gets there and they have like a weird bag, like with like
blood dripping from
blood
it.
dripping down, and like
and there's
someone
something moving,
something,
in it.
yeah, like twitching, and I could not believe that scene went the way it did. Like he asks, he draws like tons of attention to it. The camera draws tons of attention to it. It's obviously like writhing, trying to escape or something.
It's moving and it's dripping blood, like, and it's red.
He asks to see inside of it, and he goes to look. Like they let him, and like he goes to look, and it twitches again. It's already been twitching,
and it startles
him, and he walks away. Why? He's a cop. Like this is, it's like his job. I don't understand. Like
we never find out what's in the bag.
Assumedly it's a person. Like it is that, right? Like it's the only thing it could be. So like it's not. Here's the thing: easy to do a misdirection. It's a shark. It's a big fish.
Yeah.
You know, like they're coming up from the sea. Like there would be blood and it'd be drippy and it'd be like maybe still wriggling or whatever.
Yeah, they caught a big fish or like a dolphin or a shark or something. Yeah.
Cool. Like that sets our protagonist up for subversions, and maybe hey, things aren't as bad as they seem. Great, easy layup. Nope, we just don't see what it is. We get just mad blue balled by this miscellaneous bag. No idea what's in it. Hilarious.
As you mentioned, like in the original one, Summer Isle feels like still an isolated, close-knit community, but you get the impression, even by the end, that like most of the time they're normal.
Yeah.
It's like a normal small village on an island off the coast of Scotland, and once a year they have their like pagan May Day, festivals. But the rest of the year they're just normal folks, and that does not feel like the case in this one at all. Like you said, he gets to the island and the vibe is immediately evil cults.
Sussy.
Yeah. Sussy, exactly.
It's goofy as hell. But what I'll say is I do tend to appreciate in remakes when they do something different with it. And here they do something different with it, and I like the different thing being like the idea behind the cult. Like it's all run by women. We don't know why or how or what. And again, like the guys with their tongues being cut out, like all that fun culty stuff is fun and fine.
I think
but again too, like if you're going to do that, you also need to recognize like how that also completely like recontextualizes a huge portion of the dialogue in the film, and recognize that maybe you shouldn't just like repeat all of the same dialogue. But I'm also like I'm really glad they did, because it's funny as hell. So like it's not really a complaint.
Well, that's the thing.
If you're trying to do like a legitimately good remake, sure. But here I don't think that's what they were trying for, and that's totally fine.
Well, yeah, and going full circle to earlier, like the reason you can't make comedy work as well in other film remakes, like Dawn of the Dead, is they're generally played a little more straight in the original, whereas in the original Wicker Man, it is very funny, and there are elements that are on their face absurd. So, recontextualizing that works really well. And I actually wanted to mention that, I mentioned this quickly on last week's episode, but Midsummer, I feel, does a closer direct remake of the Wicker Man than this one.
Yeah. How about that? Huh?
It captures the tone of the original Wicker Man better, and a lot of the themes.
Most definitely.
Better than this one. This one, I would hesitate to say that this particular remake of The Wicker Man has any real themes. It has lots of motifs, but none of them are particularly, like, relevant to the story itself. For instance, like, the proliferation of twins on this island, we see it over and over again. There's lots of, like, pairs of twins. There's multiple sets of twins in the schoolhouse when he goes. There's the creepy old twins.
Who are the same twins from the new series of Unfortunate Events series. I thought that was fun.
Sister Rose, the teacher. He meets like her twin almost immediately after. Is like, hey, didn't I just talk to you down at the school? And she's like, no, you didn't. Does that have any bearing on the film? Is there a reason for this? No. Not really, other than twins creepy. A lot of the twins, like the old twins especially, but they do at the schoolhouse too, they talk at the same time.
It was very Shining-esque.
Yes, very Shining-esque, and that's what I mean, where it's like it's a motif, but it's not a theme. It's just like twins creepy.
Again, just reinforcing like this cult is mad sussy. Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand, like, what... Well, I do understand, but, like, if we're trying to look at this, like, from our protagonist's perspective, it just continues to reinforce that he's an idiot.
I think there's maybe maybe there's an argument for, like, they have to make the cult more overtly sinister because since our protagonist is not, like, a super devout Christian in this one, there needs to be reason for him to be put off by what's happening on the island.
You know, that's a fair take. I hadn't thought about it that way.
So they have to make it, like, seem stranger so he can carry the same kind of like disgust and frustration that Sergeant Howie has in the original.
Ugh, fucking twins.
Yeah,
Gross.
twins. Well, I mean, what it ends up doing is, rather than being a staunch Christian disgusted by these heathens on this island, it comes across as more that he's just a misogynist who really hates all of these women.
Yeah, and he's angry. And that's the thing of it, too, where, like, in the original film, like, when funny things happened, we were laughing, like, at the main character, but they felt like there was still, like a context of realism behind them, you know? Whereas here, like, we're laughing at the main character because he's acting absurd. He's not acting, like, with a sense of, like, realism or believability. Like, he's just screaming and, like, hijacking bicycles at gunpoint and shit like that. Like the main character in the original, like, has dry, believable enough like deliveries that you earnestly still feel for him by the end of the film. You know, I was still like on the edge of my seat when he looks at the Wicker Man for the first time and he says, God, Jesus Christ, no. Like it makes your stomach, it made my stomach drop. Like I was legitimately mortified for this man. And in this movie, that is so far from the case, and very funny. But
Nicolas Cage's character is hard to sympathize with in this movie.
Oh God, yeah,
which I think is fine. I don't have a problem with that. Again, like I mean, he is the standout highlight of this film.
Yes.
Everything about him and his character is, and specifically the way that Nicolas Cage portrays the character, because like I feel like he is trying to capture the same kind of intensity and conviction that like Edward Woodward has in the original, but there's less narrative reason for it, so he just comes across as a crazy person,
acting bonkers,
just acting absolutely insane. Why is it burned? Why is it burned?
No, and imagine if this movie was like, or if that character had been portrayed by like I don't know, who's the 24 guy?
Kiefer Sutherland.
Yeah, imagine like Kiefer Sutherland's role. Like it'd be a lot more boring to me.
That's what I'm saying. I think this movie as a whole would be a lot more boring without Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, I agree.
He's the driving force of just about everything entertaining about this film.
Mm-hmm. And I gotta tell you, it's entertaining as fuck.
It's great.
It's really funny,
hilarious.
I'm really glad I saw the original first.
Yeah,
like it would be way more difficult to watch the original and get, I think, the same experience out of it having watched this one already.
Well,
I think you still can, but like it's definitely going to like just change the way you perceive everything.
I feel like in a lot of ways this one is commenting on the original in very direct ways, in, you know, highlighting the absurdity of things. Where like if you saw it by itself, it wouldn't have the same impact and it wouldn't seem as intentional, I don't think.
and that's why I was actually just about to say something very similar. I think that this is one of the very rare cases where this movie is only really fun to watch if you have seen the original and have the context for it. And I think that might be one of the reasons why people hated this movie so much, same way that audiences hated the original when it came out, is because, like, the original Wicker Man's a cult classic. It is part of the lexicon of horror for, like, big fans of horror, but for your average moviegoer, they have not seen it, maybe have not even heard of it, maybe go into this movie not knowing that it's even a remake of a previous film, and to see this movie completely stripped of context, I can absolutely be like, who the fuck is this for?
Well, okay, so, this reminds me a lot of, like, how Malignant was initially received as well. Like, and I think for very similar reasons. Like, imagine, like, watching this movie, like, even without context and, like, being scared of anything.
Oh, yeah. Impossible.
Right, like, unless you're, like, a very small child. Like, you're
Nothing
just
scary in this movie.
No, and again, like, generally, like, audiences tend to rate, like, horror, like, general audiences tend to rate horror movies on, like, how much it scared them.
Yeah.
And, like,
which
so
a lot
I can,
of times is equivalent to how many jump scares are in the movie.
Yeah, honestly, like, we all know it's not really a good metric, but, like, it is just often how general audiences do, look at horror movies, and that's gonna have an effect. I would think, but again, for entertainment value, I gotta give it.
This film's very high.
I gotta give it. It's hot. Yeah, indeed. There are a lot of references here that I liked how they approached. Again, this is definitely one of those instances where when something is, like, poorly done or whatever, it's hilarious, often seemingly with intent. And when but there are also plenty of instances where I actually think that there are some nice elements of this movie. Like, some of the references are kind of cute.
I've got some references to the original off the top of my head.
Salmon of Knowledge.
Well, the Salmon of Knowledge does show up,
Yes.
though it's not named as such. But in this one, we should mention that Nicolas Cage is brought to this island because he receives a letter from his ex-fiancée who grew up there, says, hey, I have a daughter, she's been missing, please, you're the only one I can trust, you have to come to my spooky cult island and figure out what's going on. That character's name in this movie is Willow Woodward. Willow is the name of the landlord's daughter in the original. Woodward is Edward Woodward is the actor who played Sergeant Howie in the first one.
Oh, that's cute.
Edward is Nicolas Cage's character's first name. Something that I was just thinking about, and this might just be totally spitballing, but his character's name is Edward Mayless, and I was wondering, like, what is, like, the Edward is obviously from Edward Woodward, but why Mayless? And I was thinking about it as, like, I wonder if it's a very roundabout way of calling him Dickless, because they talk about, in this movie and in the original, the maypole representing the phallus, the phallic symbol. He's Edward Mayless, Mayless without May. So is it, that might be totally, totally spitballing, but
Some red string shit, but honestly, I'm here for it.
Considering how much of this movie until the end, like, he spends being, like, emasculated by all of these women, I wonder if there's something to that.
I could see it. Well, we should mention how funny the classroom scene is,
so
where
good.
they talk about the maypole.
Yeah.
The teacher brings up, now, class, what does the maypole stand for?
Or no, it's not even the maypole. She says, what is the purest nature of man? That's what it is. There's a maypole outside, but she says, what's the purest nature of man? And two of the twins say, the phallic symbol. Like, why do they repeat it?
Because twins, there's two of them.
Because there's two of them, yeah.
Yeah, that's why. Because I guess it's scary.
They had to both say it at the exact same time and twice.
Because the twins speak at the same time because it's spooky, but that's it.
And of course, we get our Beatles scene again.
Yeah.
But so much
funnier.
bigger.
It just like the original, he has the moment where he's like, whose desk is that? And they're like, oh, it's nobody's desk. He's like, oh, well, I think it's Rowan's desk. And he goes and he opens it, but instead of like the subtly sinister image of the beetle tied to the nail going around in circles until it traps itself there,
representing the main character.
Very
fun.
In this, they just put a whole ass crow in there,
big old crow,
and he opens. It's like
this scene has been going on for minutes. No squawks.
Yeah,
nothing.
It's like the one jump scare in the movie where he opens the desk and a just big ass crow flies out of the desk. And I think that they're trying to do, and I might have missed something, but I think they're trying to do the same thing where it's supposed to be representative of the main character.
It is, because they chant, kill the crow,
kill the crow, or the crow must die, like as they're burning him in the Wicker Man. But why is he the crow? Like, that's where I think, like, I might have missed a piece of dialogue or something.
There could have been.
In the original, like, the beetle on the string makes sense. Like, they're leading him around until he traps himself. He's constantly moving in the same direction, never turning or looking back. That makes sense. That tracks. Why is Nicolas Cage a crow? I don't know. And at the end, like, the teacher is wearing the crow costume. If Nicolas Cage is the crow, shouldn't he have been the one to be wearing the crow costume?
What?
Instead, he puts on the bear costume, which is a funny image, but...
Right, but also...
Because bears chase honey, bears seek honey, maybe?
Yeah, but you're right, because if he's the crow, because, like, in the original, like he dresses up as the fool, like, he takes the fool...
Yeah, he's playing the fool,
And again, it plays out throughout the film, like, well before he even puts on the fool costume, he's getting, like he's, like, bonking his fingers and stuff. Like, we that's still implied. Whereas here,
Why is Nic Cage the crow?
Who
knows?
Again, motifs without being themes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, the crow being in the desk poses way more questions than answers.
Yeah, because again, like the scene goes on for a while. Like before he opens it, you don't hear a crowd.
The crow would not just be chilling in there in real life. It would be banging and squawking around, like trying to get out. Like it would just be sitting quietly waiting for Nicolas Cage to come along and open the desk.
Yeah.
But it is, for that reason, very funny. It's like, why is the crow in the desk? Who put the crow there? The kids, presumably, but why?
Yeah, why crow in desk? I don't... Yeah, so funny, man.
That's one of the few jump scares in this movie, and I feel like every jump scare in this movie makes me just cackle with laughter. There's a jump scare early on when he's on the boat looking at a girl up against the rail, and out of nowhere a big Mack truck comes and...
Well, we should provide context for that, because unlike the original Wicker Man, this one doesn't start with him just showing up on the island having already received the letter. We see him doing his gig as a California highway patrolman. He pulls over a car because he saw that, like, a girl dropped her doll out the window, so he pulls it over to give it back. The girl, like, throws the doll back out in the road. As he goes to retrieve it, out of nowhere, a semi-truck comes along and totals the car. It catches on fire. As he's trying to, like, break the window to get the girl out, the car explodes,
propelling him backwards.
So that's sort of like sets up the movie. He has many flashbacks back to it, and that is hence why when he's on the ferry to the island, he sees a girl standing at the railing, and then all of a sudden they just pancake her with a truck, which is very, very funny. But I want to talk about, like, that setup in general, because I think that that's, like, the biggest plot hole in the film, is the significance of the people in that car. Because first of all, like, afterwards, one of his coworkers, one of the other cops, like, comes to visit him, like, while he's on leave, and mentions they didn't find any bodies in the car, and the car was unregistered. So there's, like, this mystery. He says, like, who were these people? And she's like, I don't know. I never know, right? And we initially thought that the girl in the car was the same girl in the picture because she's blonde, has pigtails, is wearing a red sweater. Like, it is a different actress because, like, later in one of the flashbacks we see that, like, the girl in the car is replaced with Rowan, who he's looking for. But, like,
Also, like, every single one of the girls in the schoolhouse, all of them look like that
All
girl
blonde
in some
pigtails,
capacity.
yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I actually kind of like that. And I
well,
do.
on the island it makes sense, and I can see where he's, like, jumping at shadows because, like, he's seeing the missing girl, he's seeing Rowan everywhere. But why the girl in the car at the beginning looks like her is it maybe supposed to be, like, part of the reason he feels compelled to go to the island to look for Rowan is because he couldn't save the girl at the beginning, and that, like, because they look similar, that he feels like this is an opportunity for him to redeem himself from that failure. I don't know. Why did the bodies disappear? Why is the car unregistered? Why do these people not exist? Like, it seems to be implied that, like, that was set up by the cult, but how or why? Like, that, none of that is ever explained. It doesn't make any sense.
No. Well, so here's the thing. I think that there is a way you can explain it away, but man, even feeling the need to with this movie is kind of silly, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Like, he is...
As an exercise, why not?
He is an unreliable narrator. We see him, like, have these visions of the scene happening. Like, he gets these, like, hallucinations. Like, the girl on the dock, for instance, in the water, like, is just the girl from his vision or whatever,
Right.
when he goes to rescue her. There isn't actually a girl in the water there. Like, he sees things like this. Like, as a form of projection of his PTSD or whatever.
Once he's on the island, it makes sense, but, like, why?
Well, because, like, he sees the girl everywhere because, like, he sees it as it's his past trauma, and it's a ghost that's following him around. So, like, he sees a girl, like, when he looks at the photo, like, maybe, I don't know, you could say, like, it's a young girl the same way, so, like, he sees the same girl.
I mean, they look the same, but it is different girls, and, like, when he has the dream where he sees the girl in the water and jumps in to save her, like, in that instance, he's seeing Rowan. He's seeing the missing girl that he's looking for. It's not the girl from the car at the beginning. It's confusing. It either feels like there's a scene that they shot that explains that they didn't cut out, or that they didn't really know what they were doing.
And it'd be easier to brush it aside if they didn't cut back to him, reimagining,
reliving it constantly.
over and over and over again.
So, one of the things I think we've established at this point is that this movie essentially takes the premise of the original film and strips all the subtext away from it, which is very funny. One of the elements of subtext in the original film that we discussed, we had a really good conversation about, was how our protagonist is the virtuous or perceives himself as virtuous, like, and so that's all the reason you need to find this girl, to rescue them or whatever, because he's a good person or whatever. Whereas here, like, we need to have this entire opening scene establishing in his backstory why he cares about saving a girl, right? Like,
he's already a cop. Like, we don't need that. And
I mean, not even just being a cop, but, like, just being a regular person, like, is a good
also,
person, like, that should be enough. I agree.
And that
that's why, like, it's stripping the
fiancé,
subtext away.
His ex-fiancé, who he still clearly has feelings for, is the one who sends the letter asking for help. Like, we don't need him to feel guilty.
Definitely don't. But I think that's the reason they put it in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Whether it's dumb
I think so,
or
because
not, it's to establish that he cares about saving people. Because he didn't save this girl, so maybe he has a chance to save this one.
Well, they have his, like, work friend at the police station that he, like, shows the letter to in the picture, and he's like, "That's not your kid. Don't worry about it."
Yeah, it's like this woman broke your heart and ran off. Like, this isn't your problem. If she wants help, like, let her talk to the father or whatever, Also, I do think something that is funny that they bring up multiple times is that the island is in Washington. They say it's in the Puget Sound. He is a California state trooper, and he does the same thing that Sergeant Howie does in the original, where he's like, I don't need permission, I'm the law. You know, like, I am supposed to be here in, like, my professional capacity, so I can look where I please, so on and so forth. But, like, as one of the women even mentions, it's like, we're in Washington, you're a California police officer, you have zero jurisdiction here. Like, he does... He cannot be there in any official capacity whatsoever, unlike our sergeant from the original, who can be there in an official capacity. I just think it's funny. Well, and later when he's, like, doing the same thing and going around, like, searching every house, and one of the women's like, you need permission to be here. He's like, I don't need anybody's goddamn permission.
You have permission to fuck off.
So this does bring up another point, or another aspect that I'd predicted as well, which is that it wouldn't be enough, that they would need to give more reasons for him to find the girl, that being, like for instance, it being his daughter. And not only is it, but also it's other reasons as well. Like, they had to stack multiple reasons on top of it.
They don't tell you right out that it's his daughter, but it's heavily implied at the beginning and then later revealed, you know, when Willow, like, lets slip. She says, like, our daughter gonna be okay, or something
really
like
awkwardly,
that. Yeah, very, very clumsily.
Like, scripty pronoun game shit.
So yeah, you definitely called that.
Yeah, which, I mean, to be fair, like, with, like, you know, referring to as, like, scripty pronoun stuff too, like, her character is, like, literally following a script at that point to lead him,
sure,
like, to it. So, like, you could explain that away, but regardless, in the moment, it does come across as pretty ham-fisted.
Yeah,
and regardless, the motive is
clumsy,
unnecessary.
yeah.
Like, you know, in the original film, like, it feels like a carefully, like, strung together plan, whereas here it's just, yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's later revealed.
Bombastic.
It's revealed at the end too that, like, Willow is Sister Summers Isle's daughter. That's another thing. For some reason, instead of it being Summer Isle in this one, it's Summers Isle. Don't know why they had to do that. Just feels
it doesn't flow off the tongue very well.
It does not roll off the tongue in the same way that Summer Isle does. Don't know why they had to make it Summer's Isle. But yeah, you're right. Like, they create so many motivations in this movie that, like, none of it really ends up working because there's too many motivations. Like, any one of these things would be enough. That he's just a good man or a good cop and cares about finding, like, his ex-fiance's daughter. That he feels guilty about not being able to save the girl and her mother at the beginning, so he looks for redemption. The fact that his fiance were to write him and be like, hey, surprise, we have a daughter and she's missing. Any one of these would be ample motivation in and of themselves. But instead we get all of them.
Yep, just crammed together. And I guess from a studio executive perspective that I don't have, you could kind of say, like, that, you know, the more reasons you give him to have it, the more members of your audience you're going to, like, gain sympathy from. The problem is when you cobble all of them together, like, none of them carry any weight because none of them have been given the time to carry weight. You know, whereas in the first one, just him finding the girl is nice and clean. You know, like there doesn't need to be any more to it because all of our focus is placed into that. And so, like, you either do or you don't, and that's fine, and it works.
In the original, he's just there doing his job, and he's good at his job and cares about his job. So that's why he's there. And this one, it's like, they're like, oh, well, we got to make sure his motivation for being there is ironclad. So let's add all of these things. But, like, again, Nic Cage spends the entire movie, like, blundering around the island, like, screaming and pointing his gun at people. So, like, none of the motivation even, like, really connects with him, like him being, like, a good man or a good cop or anything. He just comes across as, like, some psycho that they dropped on this island. We're like, hey, there's a missing girl, you gotta find her.
You know, I remember last episode I mentioned, like, imagine this character but replaced by a
by Christian Bale.
by Christian Bale with "Where is she?" And Nicolas Cage is kind of doing that.
He is, like, his character in this movie very much has that energy. Like, he has no subtlety about him whatsoever. It's just like running all over the place, kicking in doors and stumbling into things, and by the end punching a lot of women.
Yeah, and it's funny in the first one when our protagonist is like finally brought to that point where he's just like going into every house, searching every cabinet or whatever.
Yeah, it says a point of desperation.
He's been like led to that point. He's been slowly broken down with like oddities until finally like he's burst. And even from like for a puritanical character, he still goes on and like for a good while without doing that. Largely because he's British or Scottish.
He's professional.
Exactly.
He's professional. He's doing his job, and
he's from the UK, so he's very polite.
Yeah. Except not very polite.
No, but even still, he does. He's not like going around like beating in heads or whatever. No. Or threatening people for bicycles at gunpoint.
He's not polite, but he's not brutish about it.
Bingo.
Yeah. And in this one, Nicolas Cage is extremely heavy-handed with every aspect of his investigation.
But the point being that Nick, in the original film, he's slowly led to that point, whereas in this movie, I was waiting for him to already be at that point the whole time, because right off the bat, he has enough cause to be at that point. There's a what could only be like a corpse in a bag. Or a person kidnapped or something in a bag. What else is it? It's man-sized. It's kicking around. The bag is bleeding. He should already be at that point there. So it's weird.
Yeah,
it's
in the original at the beginning, it's presented that these people are withholding some knowledge. They're maybe not telling him everything. And by the end, he's like, you people are jerking me around. I'm just fuck it. I'm going to go into every single house on this island and turn it upside down until I find this girl I'm looking for. But in this one, from the very beginning, it's not they're just not letting on everything they know. It's they're jerking him around from the get-go.
Yeah.
And very, very obviously so. Another example of something like that doesn't really have any narrative significance is at the very beginning when he's in the diner, he finds a self-help cassette tape or something called Everything's Okay, and he buys that for some reason. And then there's at one point where he's in his room at the end, and he's like, hey, did somebody go through my bags? I'm missing some tapes. They're called Everything's Okay. And it's I wouldn't know anything about that. That's never again mentioned.
Well, no, because it's the movie literally telling us everything is not okay because subtext is dead.
Right, yeah. Exactly. It's we know everything's not okay. We saw the bloody bag at the very beginning. We know.
They literally took away his everything is not okay at the beginning of this movie.
Yeah, they took away his sense of okay.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I love it. I adore it.
It's why did they take that?
Mm-hmm.
What use did that have to them? Why didn't they take anything else? They didn't take his EpiPens, we saw at the beginning. He's allergic to bees. He has his EpiPens with them. That would have made more sense if they had taken his EpiPens. He'd been wow, you have bees on this island. I need my EpiPens. Somebody took those, and then later he does get stung by bees, and goes into anaphylactic shock and almost dies. And when he comes to and asks the doctor, did you use the adrenaline shot? She's like, no, I healed you in the old ways.
It's so ridiculous too, because when he's falling down the hill getting stung by bees, he pulls out his EpiPen and looks at it and then just passes out, and it's never used.
Later on they use it.
Yeah, they use it on him later on. But see,
which is weird because they have the old way. So why did they?
Well, that's the thing. That's why it would make sense for them to steal his EpiPens early on, so he doesn't have them. So when he gets stung by the bees, he's put into a position of helplessness where they have to heal him, and they say, and then he can say something like, "Oh, I lost my EpiPens. Did you find them? Is that?" And they're like, "Oh no, we healed you with the old way." noise, and then we get like a cutaway to like a wastebasket or something with like one of his EpiPens in it, like covered in like paper or tissue or something. So then you can say like, yeah, they stole his EpiPens so they could get him stung by bees and then bring him back
I guess,
from the brink of death.
I guess
like,
there's
that
context for that, because maybe they did do that and we just didn't get the shot.
But they didn't steal his EpiPens. Like, that's the thing.
Oh, didn't they? Because they do use one on him at the end, or did they just pull that from? I don't know, man. Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
Right?
Like,
I guess you're right.
They probably got the
damn place.
EpiPen because he had
it on him and he dropped it.
Let's talk more about that scene, because like our character is like allergic to bees, and like we get a shot of like the house with like bees all over it, and like the beekeeper thing like at a good distance as he comes up on it. He's aware of it. We see him see it. And he still gets really close to it, and then is like, "Oh my God, bees!"
Yeah,
and then the camera
the field,
has an overhead shot, and he's at the middle of this giant bee field. We saw him like come into it, but now like he's in the middle. It's so confusing. Like,
it's like he
how did he? Like, again, he just looks like an idiot for getting in that scenario, and it's so
he just
funny.
Stumbles into the field full of bees and gets stung up and almost dies.
Like deep into the middle of this field full of bees.
Well, that's the thing. It's like at the beginning, he stumbles onto the edge of it, but then when the bees start swarming around him, instead of turning around and running back the way he came, he just runs further into the field of bees,
knocking other beehives over,
and then we see like the overhead shot of him
tripping
like,
on shit. It's
of him
hilarious.
tripping, knocking more beehives over, like angering more bees. I do think from a set design perspective, that field is cool because like
honeycomb pattern.
It has like paths cut into it and like honeycomb patterns, and like there's a beehive like at each like corner of each hexagon. It looks very cool. I love the beekeeper costumes.
Oh, they look
this.
really cool.
They're very spooky.
They look believable and also horrifying and intimidating. Like it's a really nice combination. I love like the black netting is really creepy, like on the front of them.
I think the inclusion of like bees as like a central part of this island's commerce is like a cool addition to this movie that the original didn't have.
Honestly,
like,
great.
I like that stuff.
There's a lot of other neat like uses of it. Like all of the doors have like the honeycomb pattern like carved into them. There's some really gorgeous sequences like when he's running through like the large house. There's like these cool like honeycomb like colored drapes and things, and like other more like hexagonal windows again. He opens a door and there's just a lady just like hanging out covered in bees, which I like. It's like they're one with the bees, so they're gonna have like times, they're a cult. They're gonna have times where they just sit there and as an act of faith like just get covered in bees. Like real beekeepers do that. They just kind of like go out and make bee beards for themselves for fun. I can like that's kind of neat. It's a thing.
He sees one of the men in bed, but covered in bee stings.
He almost looked like a leper, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because he's so covered in bee stings, which is like, ooh, spooky cult stuff. Like they say, they only keep men around for breeding, So he's in bed and he's naked, but he's covered in bees. So like, are they fucking covered in bees?
They like to keep them submissive and breedable.
And beatable. I mean, they do. There is another jump scare. When he goes back down to the dock and he sees that the plane has been destroyed.
We should talk about he
turns and he sees the corpse there.
I don't know if that's really a jump scare. You can kind of, like as he stumbles,
I think it is. Like
as he stumbles up to it, you can kind of see the body there. Like it's just
they foreshadow a little bit, but the camera like snaps to it. There's a noise, and I love it too because like his eyes have been like cut out or whatever, and his mouth is sewn, and a seagull flies overhead behind him and squawks loudly, and it's a fun reference to Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. It has to be intentional, right? Because like there's the shot in The Birds of the person like in the car with their eyes pecked out, and like and it's a very like striking moment. And I thought it's sort of a horror take on a Wilhelm scream, just having a bird like squawk through the background. It's pretty funny. Like,
it is fun. Mentioning jump scares, I do want to go back to that really quick because we talked a lot about how this film reuses the truck crash a bunch as Nic Cage revisits it. this movie also abuses the dream sequence.
Yes.
Nic Cage is falling asleep all the time. He might as well have narcolepsy. He's just falling asleep everywhere he goes.
Well, I feel like, yeah, it almost feels like they need excuses for, like, him to find, like, surreal, creepy things, and then they have to be like, oh, it was just a dream. So in order to do that, they have to have him just, like, falling asleep randomly, like, as he's investigating. Like, and they do the fucking dream within a dream thing on the dock when he sees the girl underwater, he dives under and, like, you know, grabs her, and then he wakes up on the dock, and he's like, dream, or whatever. And then it does a punch out, and on his lap is the drowned girl, and then he goes, and he wakes up again!
Man,
So, why? It's so funny!
I feel like punch-outs are underutilized.
Absolutely.
It's always the punch-in.
I mean, punch-ins in general are underutilized, but punch-ins and punch-outs, yeah.
It's true. Yeah, you don't see as many punch outs, and you know what? Just like punch ins, they're usually funny. Like,
yes.
I mean, absolutely in this case. But yeah, my man, like, he's even falling asleep, like, having dreams, like, when he gets locked in, like, the flooded catacombs under the ruins of the old church, like, as he's, like, holding on to the bars, like, yelling for help, like, he just kind of, like, falls asleep so we can get the same fucking dream sequence. Again.
We get it so many times.
Except, like, every time it's, like, slightly different. Like, that's the one where...
Yeah, but for the most part, it's the same
like,
shots that we've already seen. And, like, yeah, they might change up a little thing here, like it's the daughter instead.
Well,
but,
yeah,
like,
and
we
that
still
one,
have
it's
to
the
have,
daughter instead
we
of the
still
girl
have to
in the
sit
car,
through
yeah.
the whole thing again, like, just to get that little
Well, they
change.
do-
It's like, just, you can do it once where it's, like, the girl and, like, the other things.
I think the...
Or just get snippets, but, like, it's there's so much cutting back to it.
In the dream sequences, they do what I think is the ugliest thing aesthetically that the movie does, where, like, the dream sequences, like, they're desaturated, like you usually get in, like, dream sequences and flashbacks, but they also do, like, multiple overlays of, like, the same thing.
It's like
but,
ghosted images.
Yeah, but set, like, a couple of seconds apart, so, like, they ghost into each other, and it looks bad. Like,
It's also like a gross sepia tone, almost.
Yeah, and, like, aesthetically, it feels... It dates the film more than I think just about anything else does. It's like, that is very 2005, 2006.
And yeah, for, like, flashbacks that, like,
bad.
aren't even necessary to, like,
Yeah.
it's a lot.
Yeah, again, it's like the only purpose that, like, the flashback dream sequences serve is to show that he's, like, tortured.
Yeah, I guess padding. Like,
It's like, we don't need that.
No.
Like, my man is running around, like, pointing his gun at people for no reason. Like, we know that this is a tortured man.
yeah, there's no reason for that padding. Just leave the Paddington Bear or whatever pun. Like, yeah, it's a silly thing. But, you know, like, that being said, like, as gripes go, like, they're only, like, 2 minutes a pop, you know, for each of these flashbacks. So, like, they don't
there's
last
just
that long.
It's just too many.
There's just a couple
of
minutes
them.
and it's over with. Like,
It's just
yeah,
too
I'm not-
many of them. It's like every time
Yeah.
we get back to it, it's like, okay, we've seen it, we get it. Like, why do you keep showing us this?
One thing I'd like to talk about is the music, right?
Yes,
The music is such an important part of the original.
Corn rigs and barley.
Corn rigs and
rigs,
barley was sorely missed in this, but we did get the legend Angelo Badalamenti doing the score for this. What's odd is the music really doesn't stand out all that much.
That is pretty good.
I agree with both of you. I think it's good. I don't think it stands out.
It doesn't stand out the same way as the original. I mean, the original, like you said, is essentially a musical. This film has no, like, actual, like, diegetic singing.
Yeah.
Or non-diegetic, I always get the two mixed up. But,
Diegetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is that. But to be fair, too, again, remakes don't have to be exactly like the original. I'm okay with that choice.
I think the
know.
score's pretty competent. Like, it never bothered me, and there are a few times I'm like, oh yeah, this is nice. I mean, Badalamenti is a good composer. Like he makes good music. Honestly, I would love to have seen this movie directed by David Lynch. I think that would have elevated it.
Wow.
Like, you've already got Badalamenti, so like let Lynch direct this fucking weird, absurd adaptation of The Wicker Man. I think it would elevate it to like truly next level status.
I'd love to see a David Lynch Wicker Man. That would be insane.
We should talk a little bit about Sister Summers Isle. She is our stand-in for Christopher Lee, played by Ellen Burstyn.
Who's great.
Now that I think about it, sorry to cut back to the previous conversation, but like, now that I think about it too, like Twin Peaks like shares a lot of common themes like to the original Wicker Man, right? Like, we have our like law judicial protagonist or whatever, like going in to find a missing girl. And there's something like strange underneath the surface of the town. Beyond that, like it differs pretty wildly. But I think like the overarching concept is kind of similar. I'd never thought about that before.
I mean, note to viewers: if you want to see David Lynch direct Nicolas Cage, watch the film Wild at Heart.
Yeah,
It
that's a
is
Lynch I still
a
haven't
classic.
seen.
It's one of my lists. Oh, we should watch that one together at some point.
But yeah, going back to Ellen Burstyn, she's one of the great actresses of all time. I think one of my all-time favorite monologues of any film is from Requiem for a Dream, where she's hopelessly addicted to pills and talking about her life's regrets. But
she's also the mom in The Exorcist, in the original Exorcist.
Yeah.
Linda Blair's mother.
But I think she does a serviceable job in this film.
I don't think the script does her any favors.
No, she's not written as memorably as Christopher Lee.
She's just not given as many opportunities to be either. Like, most of her monologue is delivered with them just kind of like walking around the grounds, which are very pretty.
Yeah, she really only has like a couple of scenes in this movie total, like where he, goes to talk with her just like how he does with Lord Summerisle in the original, but that comes way later in the film. And then, of course, she's leading the procession and the ritual at the end of the movie. But yeah, she's...
Also, like, in the script, her character is much less deep. Lord Summerisle, there's some uncertainty as to whether or not he believes it himself. The ritual has another motive as well, is just to motivate the people there. Whereas... Lady Summerisle just is part of the cult. Like there is no other reason that she would have any differing motivations. Nothing like that is ever really given to us.
Well, I feel like in the original film, all of the inhabitants of the island, including Lord Summerisle, are kind of played for camp a little bit. They are campy characters in a lot of respects, where the main character is played very straight. Whereas for this film, I feel like it's the opposite, where the inhabitants are played very straight, but Nic Cage is just going batshit.
Yeah.
And I feel like in some respects, that juxtaposition is kind of necessary, but at the same time, I wish we could have seen more campy characters.
Yeah, I think so too. In general, like, I think they should have just been more over the top with like the weird, creepy cult. If they're going to make them so explicitly sinister from the get-go, like, you should really lean on that, because I think in that regard, like, a lot of that stuff feels kind of generic, like the spooky stuff the cult is doing. Like, he goes to the doctor's house and he finds, like, the book about, like, ancient pagan rituals, and he goes into, like, her lab, and she's got, like, a bunch of fetuses in jars and shit, and it's like, ooh, spooky. But, like, I want the characters to be a little bit more over the top although, I mean, I was gonna say to match Nicolas Cage, but it's like, you can't match Nic Cage's intensity. But I think that does segue well. We've been going for a while. We should talk about the last 15, 20 minutes of this movie. We should also mention, because we didn't talk about at the beginning, that we watched the unrated director's cut of this movie, not the theatrical version, which I think is frankly essential, and it has been from what we can tell, pretty much largely removed from the internet everywhere.
Yes,
like Ben had to buy the DVD so we could get the director's cut of this movie.
Yeah, this film is streaming some places. You can rent it. It's all going to be the theatrical cut. That's a real shame because there's a reason partially why the theatrical cut bombed so hard with audiences, I feel like. And one of the main reasons is it's cut down to be PG-13.
Yeah.
And because of that, they cut one of the most crucial scenes of the film, and that is, of course, the bees.
The bees.
Oh no, not the bees.
Not
They're
the
in my
bees.
eyes.
And instead, they, for some reason, they don't cut out any of the violence against women, and Nic Cage just going around and punching and kicking women in the face.
I will say, like, in terms of optics, it doesn't look great.
No.
But
It's
incredibly funny.
see, here's the thing,
It's
right?
incredibly funny.
Like, couple things to preface on this one first. But like, okay, so to be clear though, like, was there not? I heard this secondhand, so I don't know how rumor mongery or whatever this is. But did some streaming service not like cut those scenes out or something, like some of those sequences out because it portrays violence against women, or is that just like some?
I would not be surprised.
Yeah,
I don't,
because that
know...
also sounds like the kind of rage-inducing whateverness that like you would just kind of hear online that might not have anything behind it.
Well,
I don't know how true that is or what streaming service, but
I mean, streaming services, especially shit on like Amazon Prime, like certain movies have been edited from their original versions, like notably like Avatar, the version that's streaming on Amazon Prime cuts out the ponytail fucking scene.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean that's a conversation for a different day, but there's a surprising and unsettling prevalence in streaming services these days of like re-editing movies that came out a long time ago to make them more like PC, I guess, or so like I don't know. I would not be surprised to learn if some streaming services like Amazon cut out some of the lady punching from this movie because like I said, in terms of optics, it doesn't look great, but in terms of like how it's presented in the movie and how it's executed, it's extremely slapstick.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
yeah.
It's just like there's like 3 instances where Nic Cage just runs up and just right hooks a woman like right in the face.
No stop what you're doings, no cease and desists, nothing like that. Just walks up and just
when he steals
bop.
the bear costume from the lady, he just like runs up and punches her.
Just cold cocks, just bam.
The second one, which is my
insane.
favorite, is I think you can make an argument for self-defense because it's like after he knocks out the other woman, he's like trying to put on the bear costume, and like the young girl, the like teenage girl, like jumps on his back and is like trying to take him down, and he and he just kicks her in the face, right?
Like a judo, like some John Wick shit.
It's like a taekwondo. Yeah, it's like martial arts. Like he side kicks her like in the face into the wall of all like the photographs, which all like shatter.
And again, it feels like a need to have like more in your movie, more action, and just boom, boy, misses that point. And yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? Like, I mean, first off, like it's a fictional movie. No one is actually getting hurt, so like I think it's okay to find that funny. I'm happy to be wrong.
It's just not something that you typically see in films where like the action is just like an insane police officer just running around punching various women in the face.
Right. And like, I'm even happy to like have that be like on a title card or like on like on a rating warning or whatever, like there are people who've had to deal with like, whatever stuff, and they might not want to see that in their horror movie or whatever. Like you could feel free to flag it, but I don't know if anyone actually did cut it out or whatever, but like cutting it out of the movie seems like a bit an overstep to me.
Well, like, there's another great one after he's put on the bear costume and has gone on the procession. This time he's not playing the fool, he's playing the bear, which is really funny because like there's like a thin like mesh like veil over his face, but you can very obviously see that it's him.
Still, yeah, you can, like,
underneath.
everyone can still tell. Like,
And
it's
like
him.
yeah, and you know, like most of the people in this procession, as in most of the people of the cult, are women, you know, and like when he runs up, like it's very obviously like a man in the bear costume.
Well, he's like a head and a half taller
Yeah,
than everyone.
exactly. But you know, the procession, similarly to the original, it leads to this time into the woods instead of the beach, and he sees like Rowan tied up to like a pyre, like about to be burned, and there's just a great shot of like he breaks free from the procession. There's like a shot of him like running up the hill because like the hill is a little just like this like bear costume just like running up a hill, and like the woman up there is like, "Oh, what's wrong, sister?" And he just like haymakers her. It's just like without stopping.
Yeah, you know, like he's already like decked like two women in this movie,
Yeah.
like two like cultists in this movie. Like gender aside, like I guess what they do is like gender aside, they're evil cultists. Like
Right,
that's the
right.
other thing too. Like where it's like here's the thing too. Like from his perspective, and the audience perspective, like these people have like kidnapped and killed children. Like
they're
I don't-
about
that's the thing, like,
they're about to burn
regardless
a
of their-
child to death.
Yeah, like regardless of gender or whatever else like that, they're murdering
They're the
people.
villains,
Yeah,
yes.
and again, still bad optics. Don't get me wrong, but like
bad optics stripped of context, but
Yeah,
you know,
like,
I think in terms of the narrative, it's justified, and you know, as you say,
Yeah.
gender aside,
you can have
they're
good
about-
feminists, you can have evil feminists, you can have, you know, like it's a wide, varied world with all sorts of perspectives in it.
I think that
Like-
there's more of an argument for like how the film presents feminism as a whole being
Yeah.
problematic. Like that, I think you can absolutely argue. Like Nic Cage running around punching some women in the face who are like evil cultists, you know. It is what it is. But the film being like feminism is evil, and like Nic Cage even being like, so you treat men as second-class citizens, like disdainfully. It's like,
Yeah, you can definitely like picture like a you know the shot from I think it's like Wolf of Wall Street of like Leonardo DiCaprio like pointing at the TV or whatever, getting excited.
Oh,
like,
from
you
Once Upon a Time in
yeah,
Hollywood.
Once Upon a Time in
Yeah,
Hollywood. Yeah,
yeah.
you can kind of see like an incel doing that during scenes
like,
like
"Ooh!"
that. You're like, ooh, yeah, that. You know, like you could definitely see like like how an incel like or you know like some other meninist or whatever would like really enjoy those elements of this movie. It's what it is.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's just it hasn't aged well in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing that they, you know, after he frees Rowan and they do the same kind of thing where they go on a little merry chase and, you know, but then she leads him right to the cult, and that scene is very similar to the one in the original, except in this one Nic Cage has a gun that he's flailing around. They take it from him, and we did go back and we watched the ending of the theatrical version afterwards to see exactly how it differs. And at this point, like, as they seize him in the theatrical version, it like cuts to the next scene where they take him to the Wicker Man, but like some of the audio is still happening in the background where like you can hear them like breaking his legs and stuff.
Yeah,
where
it's really loud in the mix. Like you hear like the Foley snap, which is clearly like them like breaking a log. Like it's got a really
Yeah.
crunchy sound to it. And it's super loud.
and we get a line of him going, "Ah, my leg!"
My leg, like
which is not in the director's cut because
we don't
seeing
read it.
Yeah.
We're seeing them smashing his knees with a hammer.
It's like a
yeah.
1940s, like 50s, like radio drama. Like it's so heavy-handed. It's like, oh well, you know, we're not the moving pictures, so we got to have them say, "Oh my goodness, I'm being robbed." You know, like
Yeah.
it's that kind of same thing where it's just like the procession's leading up, and it's like, well, his legs are broken, but we've cut that scene out, so we just have to have him scream, "Ah, my legs!" in
my
the background.
leg.
But the way that you would do it is you have them all gathered around and you still set it up, but then don't show it, right? But
yeah,
instead
you
it just
see-
hard cuts to
you see them-
the procession and you
see
just
them
hear
like
it.
yeah. The right way to do it would be to like see them raise up the
Yes.
hammer, and then as they bring it down, cut to the like may have the audio of him screaming or something carry over and cut to the next scene. But instead they just have that play out purely in audio as they like walk him up to the Wicker Man.
Yeah, and
then
maybe maybe there's some dumb regulation reasons why or something,
Yeah.
or like in the editing booth they just kind of slapped their hands and said, okay, that's good.
yeah,
enough.
well,
Maybe it's
that's-
like a weird MPAA type of thing.
Yeah,
but
hard to
more
tell.
importantly,
Yes.
we lose the B sequence in the
Yes,
theatrical
which is
cut.
baffling to me.
Oh no, not the bees. They're not in my eyes.
Not the bees. Which, in terms of like what they do to him in general, like, okay, I understand they break his legs so he can't run, so they can take him to the Wicker Man. They still end up taking him and burning him, but what is the necessity of the extra step to put like a mesh helmet on his head and then dump some bees into it so they can sting him up a little bit and then they inject him with the EpiPen? Like, don't get me wrong.
Fun.
I'm glad it exists. It is the part that everybody knows about this movie is Nic Cage screaming, "Not the bees, they're in my eyes."
We
I'm
should
glad-
mention bad CGBs.
Yes, when they take the helmet, the mesh helmet thing off, you can see that it is the same CGB copy and pasted all over his face. They're moving at the same, like their wings are moving at the same time. Like they didn't even make an effort to like stagger their movement so it looked different. It's just the same bad CGB over and over again. It's pretty fucking funny. Again, I'm very glad that part exists in the movie, because I think that it is, if not the funniest part of the movie, certainly one of them. Like it's memed for good reason. But then it ends pretty similarly to the original. They take him to the Wicker Man.
Well, it does in the director's cut.
Yes. We'll talk about how the theatrical cut differs in a second. But yeah, they take him to the Wicker Man. We even have a similar moment of him like seeing the Wicker Man and being like, "Oh my god!" Except the performance is much funnier. It's like, "Oh my god!"
Miles and miles apart from the amount of weight that the original carried.
Yeah. And, of course, because it's a remake and needs to be bigger and better, like, the Wicker Man itself is much larger and grander than the one in the original. But, for many reasons we've already stated, that scene lacks the kind of horror and weight that the original has. Just going to show that, what we already know, bigger does not necessarily mean better.
Yeah, and to be fair, the Wicker Man is about the
mean, it
same
looks-
size and scale.
I think it's quite a bit larger, because in the original they just walk him up some steps and put him in like the chest, but in this one they like tie him by his ankles and like haul him
hoist him
all the way
to the
up
head.
into the head. Like
Yeah.
it's bigger.
That's true. I guess one aspect too is like it didn't strike me as grand, or strike me as grand, because in the original, like, it's on the coast, so it's
On
just
the cliffs,
it's
yeah.
like it's rocky, like, bluffs and just this one great monolith, right? Whereas here, like, it's in a tree line.
Yeah.
And so like it's not standing alone. It
Yeah.
is like still in an environment with trees like as big as it. So like comparatively, it doesn't feel as domineering to me. But I didn't mind the design of it for sure. And
mean,
I
it
did
looks
like that it's in the
fine.
clearing too.
It's fine.
I just felt like it didn't have as much, like, again, weight or whatever, but it
Well,
didn't
yeah,
need to.
and
Just
also-
because it was funny.
And
But-
also, like, there's, instead of, getting the sort of dichotomy that you have in the original where they start singing one of their folk tunes, like Summer is a-Coming, and like a harvest song, while Howie, like, tries to belt out a hymn to drown them out. Instead, in this one, they just chant over and over again, "The crow must die, the crow must die," like, as they set it on fire. It's not as interesting, I think.
No, in the original, they're all singing. They're happy. They're gonna have their harvest again, and because
Yeah.
of it, like that, there's duality. It's a happy, like, folk.
It's a
song.
celebration. It's a festival.
Yeah, here there's no duality.
In this,
like,
it's
subtext
like
is
spooky
dead.
cult. The crow
Must die. The crow must die. It's just
And
evil.
Gooble gobble. Gooble gobble.
Yeah.
It's very disrespectful to Brandon Lee, honestly.
Yeah, he already died when they made this movie.
Yeah, which it does bring up my next prediction, where I did predict correctly so, that they wouldn't be able to resist, and they'd have to show big matte painting shots of the island. They did it twice.
I don't think it was a matte painting, though. It was CG, especially
Well,
in
like
that...
CG matte painting. It's still a
Especially
matte painting,
in that second
technically.
one where, like, the waves are, like, very obviously CG. Like, the water looks like a Windows XP, like, screensaver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you did call that. But in the director's cut, similarly to the original, as the Wicker Man, burns and collapses, it cuts to credits. But in the theatrical version, they tacked on a 6 months later scene. Is a really bad scene of like back in Civilization, and we see a young James Franco at a bar with like his friend, and Willow and like the young the teenage girl like come into the bar and like start hitting on James Franco and his friend, and they even go so far as to like ask James Franco like what he does, and it's like, oh, I'm a cop, like I just graduated from the police academy, so it's like, do they exclusively lure cops?
Well, in the original, like him being like a member of the law is important, but in this one, that's not established.
No, in this one, their reasoning, all they say is that it has to be a stranger who is connected to the community. So what they do is, in case of bad harvests, they send out like some of their women to like seduce guys and get knocked up. So if they have a bad harvest, they can call them later and be like, hey, our daughter's missing, can you come to the island and look for her? So like Nic Cage was a cop. Like, it just felt so hackneyed that like James Franco had to also be a cop. Like, just the first guys that they met at the bar also happens to be police, but as at the very end, it's like zooming in on like the girl's face, and it it fades in like the sound of bees buzzing and Nicolas Cage screaming. For some reason. For no reason, like as it zooms in on her face. I will say I'm very glad that they cut that scene from the director's
It's
cut.
just really clumsily directed, and
Once again, it's what we...
It's unnecessary, yeah.
It's what we talked about in the last podcast. Like, like your average audiences are gonna like see the credits roll and want more and know like what happens with the cult and what.
Yeah.
But what's funny here is like it's even less necessary because like we don't have all like the setup of knowing whether or not Lord Summerisle will be killed if the crops fail.
Yeah.
The next year, like in that there's even more cause to like potentially show the ending for audience wanting to see it. But here, like there really isn't any reason or whatever because like him being killed is really only for the crops and that's it.
Yeah.
And Lady Summerisle is on board with it, so there's no like potential like logical confrontation with the crops failing the next year. They just get another
Right.
man. So like there's no reason to know what happens next. We know what happens next. So yeah, like getting that scene is even less relevant in this version. Dumb.
Yeah.
Really dumb.
Yeah. Anyway, are y'all ready to rate this one?
sure.
One last thing. I thought it was mildly it's a cool mask, but I did think it was mildly amusing that the DX character in the procession is wearing a jackalope mask.
Yeah.
That's all.
The masks are cool.
Yeah, they do really look neat.
The costume and production design of this movie are good. Yeah, so obviously very, very different tonally from the last one. It's this is a movie that I think is pretty stupid, but extremely entertaining. And I think how much of it is by design and how much of it is by providence, is up for debate. But we sure do love to see it, folks.
Oh, yeah.
I can't in good conscience put this on nearly the same level as the original, but I do like this movie. I do think it's very fun, as dumb as it is. So I'm gonna give it a strong 4 out of 5. I think it's a fun movie.
Yeah, ditto that. I mean, this movie is dumb schlock, but it's my kind of dumb schlock.
Yeah,
damn
absolutely.
it! I really appreciate that Nic Cage is in pure Nic Cage form, as I would hope. Yeah, 4 out of 5 for me too.
Ditto that. I'm also gonna give it a nice strong 4 out of 5. It's a fun romp, depending on which version for the whole family, and I think that when it's good, it's pretty good. Like again, I like the set dressing, and some of the world building ideas are fun. And when it's not good, it's hilarious. And kind of with a self-aware wink and a nod. So, few complaints from me. A healthy 4, which is nice because it's unanimous.
Yeah, once
Still.
again, we're unanimous. It's certainly not a golden pod,
But it's still an echo chamber.
But it's still an echo chamber, and it's a fun one. So the 2006 remake of The Wicker Man gets a unanimous 4 out of 5 from us. That is our podiversary brought to a close. We're excited to start our 5th year. I think next week is Titan. Is that right?
Indeed.
The new Julia Ducournau film. For listeners who listen to our Raw episode, it's the same director.
I need to mentally prepare myself for that one. That's going to be heavy.
It did. I saw at the time of recording. It's fresher. By the time our episode comes out, it'll be a little bit less fresh. But the film did just win the Palme d'Or at Cannes. Put whatever importance into that you want. I'm pretty excited as somebody who loves Raw. This one gives me big Crash vibes. David Cronenberg's Crash, not the racist one from the mid-2000s. Next week, come back as we start our 5th year of the podcast with hopefully a bang with Julia Ducournau's Titan. Time for a sponsor.
All right.
Sponsor shelf needs to be refilled pretty soon.
Corn rigs and corn rigs and corn rigs and our corn rigs. Corn rigs, our corn rigs. All right, this episode is brought to you by the fire of human liberty.
Another really appropriate one. This happened 2 weeks ago.
I got the fire of human liberty. I'm setting fires everywhere.
Wow.
2 weeks in a row.
Damn, that couldn't be better, couldn't it?
Couldn't
Damn,
be
how,
better.
How about that miscellaneous sponsor from the sponsor shelf? This episode is brought to you by the fire of human liberty. I've got a hot hat full of wicker, and I'm coming for your corn.
I'm coming.
I'm coming.
I'm a human, and I'm coming.
These liberal cults need to be stopped, and I'm gonna punch my way through all of them.
If you think about it, what is more the fire of human liberty than creating your own mini sovereign nation on an island away from the U.S. government where you set people on fire for crops? Like that is the fire of human liberty.
I bet Alex Jones would be very conflicted in that respect. Yeah, is the Wicker Man a libertarian's dream or nightmare?
Libertarian's dream, for sure.
Yeah.
Lots of punching women.
Yeah. Damn. Shout out to our libertarian listeners.
Yeah.
I hope you're still our listeners. Or not, I don't know.
Whatever. All right, that'll bring us to the end of this week's episode. If you like the show, give us a podiversary gift and leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and a couple words about why you like the show. You can also become a subscriber to our Patreon at patreon.com/podpeoplepod. We got 3 different subscriber tiers you can subscribe to depending on what your means are and how you want to support the show. Shout out to our honorary pod boys, Sam Simon, Sarah Morris. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all, as always. You can follow the show on Twitter at PodPeoplePod and check out our Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/you guessed it, PodPeoplePod. Where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those reviews. And you can follow me on Twitter at SomeSpookySnake.
I'm on Twitter at Mr. Sheets.
Wow, I'm on Twitter, tweeting for Light Arc Studio. You can follow our progress on It Stares Back, see all sorts of cool art and animations and neat designs and actual matte paintings, not kind of CG rendered ones. I do them in Photoshop. But anyway, point is, you can see some fun art. I mean, I don't know. I'll leave whether it's nice or not up to you. You can also find my work on ArtStation, and I'm currently working at DreadXP, doing all sorts of fun stuff. Go check out, go wishlist My Friendly Neighborhood, or go play Spookware, or one of the DreadX collections. There's all sorts of fun stuff that we've put out and are going to be putting out. That's really neat.
No shortage of content.
Heck yes.
All right. Thank you, as always, for listening. Until next time, just remember, not the boys! They're in your ears!